Alright, so now that we've talked a little bit about functions, what they are, what's going on, let's go ahead and have some practice writing our own functions, right? So we've already seen a couple of built-in functions in Python. We've been using them for a couple weeks now. So now let's talk about how do you write your own functions in Python. Alright, so something to keep in mind when you're writing a function is you are going to have to name it, just like how the function print is named print. So a function's name should be descriptive enough so that anyone who's reading the code should be able to guess approximately what that function is going to do, right? The function print is named print because it displays a message, it prints a message out on the screen. The function int is called int because it converts a value to an integer. So just like variables, when you name functions, there are rules and guidelines to doing so. So these are the rules. You cannot use a Python keyword, so this includes you shouldn't be using other Python built-in function names as well, so you shouldn't write your own function name print. It cannot contain spaces, has to start with a letter or an underscore. All other characters must be a letter, number, or an underscore, and uppercase and lowercase letters are distinct. These rules might sound pretty familiar because they're basically the same rules as naming a variable. Some guidelines, so again, these are things that you should be doing but won't necessarily break your code if you do it. So the main difference between a function and a variable is just a storage location for a single value. It's like the noun, again, of our program. These functions are going to be the verbs. These are the actions that our program can do. So generally, when you are naming functions, you want to use verbs. You want to use words that describe an action as the name. So for example, print. That is an action. You print something. So again, use verbs to name your functions. And then the same guideline with variable names that have multiple words in them. You're going to do the same thing with functions. So if you have a function that's like print these numbers or something, I don't know, just just thought of that off the top of my head. So use lowercase letters, and then since you can't use spaces, just go ahead and use underscores. So same sort of idea as variables, basically the same rules and guidelines. The only difference is for functions you should be using verbs for your names. Alright, so how exactly do you write your own function? So to write your own function, you write what is called a function definition. So function definition, it's named as such because it's essentially defining what a function is. So this is the general form for a function definition. Again, this is the general form of how you write your own function in Python code. So you start off with the word def, D-E-F. That's basically short for definition. So you always start with that. That is like a Python specific key term that's saying, hey Python, I am now writing a function definition. So you start off with def, then you write the function name, and again, if it's multiple words, use an underscore for the name. You do open close parentheses. Sometimes there will be stuff in the parentheses, we'll talk about that later. And then you do a colon. So the first line of a function definition is always def, name, open parentheses, maybe some stuff, close parentheses, then a colon. That's always the first line. And then again, a function is a collection of statements that are grouped together to do whatever the function is supposed to do. So the way you keep those statements grouped under a function is you keep them indented. So these statements here, statement, statement, so on, all of these have been indented over once. So you press the tab character on your keyboard to do that. So you do have to be careful about these indents. Python is really, really picky about tabs and indentation. So again, with function definitions, def, function name, open close parentheses, colon, and then whatever statements you put inside of it, and these can be any lines of Python code that we've already talked about. Whatever statements you want to be part of that function, they have to be indented over underneath this def function name so on line. So make sure you're careful about those indents. Alright, so here's an example of a function. So this function, its name is show message. And again, I know that because the general form of a function definition is def space name of the function. So the name here is show underscore message, and then open close parentheses, and then a colon. And this function has 2 lines of code in it. There's 2 statements that are going to be run when this function goes. They're both print statements, so yes, you can use other functions inside of function definitions. So this function will essentially print these 2 lines. It'll say print, hello, I'm Emily, print, I am a CS professor. Alright, so again, show message is the function name. This function definition here has 2 lines of statements, and again, note the indentation. Both these print statements are indented over. We had to press the tab character to do that. Alright, so whenever you write a function, it's sort of a 2-part process. There's the function definition, which is what we just talked about, the def function name, blah blah blah, with the statements underneath it. So when you write that function definition, it literally just defines the function. It just says, hey, Python, this is the function, this is what it does, but it doesn't actually run that code yet. Alright, it just sort of sets it up so that if you wanted to run that code in the future, you would know exactly what you needed to do. So again, a function definition, it only defines what the function is, does not actually run any code. So to actually run the code in a function, after you write the function definition, you then have to make a call to it. So this is what we're calling a function call. So a function call, to write that in your code, you do the name of the function. So in the previous example, the function name was show message, and then open close parentheses, and that's it. Sometimes there will be stuff inside these parentheses, but for show message, there is no stuff in it. And whenever we use, for example, print, int, all those built-in functions that have been created for us already that we've been using for a couple weeks, the way we've been using them is by making function calls to them, right? We type in the word print, open close parentheses, sometimes with stuff in it, right? So that is a function call. The function definition for print is already saved on your computer. That is one of the things that was downloaded when you downloaded Python. So the built-in functions are functions whose definitions have already been written, and then you can call them whenever you want. They're still function calls though when you make that call to these functions. And then when you write your own functions, you can write the function definition yourself, and then whenever you want to use it, you then use this function call as well. So I think for a lot of stuff for this class, I can sit here and show you these slides and talk about it as much as I want, but I think you will get more out of it if you just practice it yourself. So what I'm going to ask you to do is go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to go ahead and write a new file in idle. So go open up idle, file, new file, and then I want you to write this code into it. Now when you're writing this code, I want you to pay really close attention to the indents, and go ahead and change it too, so that instead of printing, hello, I'm Emily, have it print your name instead, and then have it print, your profession instead. So go ahead and write up this code. I will do it with you. So file, new file, and then just for sake of time, I'm going to copy and paste, but I highly recommend that you type out the code because you need to practice writing these function definitions. And you can see here when I copy and pasted it, it actually didn't keep the indents. So make sure these indents are here, because this right here, this is the function definition for show message. This is the function that we're writing, and then this is the function call. Alright, so let's go ahead and write this, go ahead and save, and you can save it as, let's just say function example for now. Cool. Alright, so here's an example of a function. First, let me show you what happens if you don't have this function call here. So let me get rid of this, and let's go ahead and run this. So all I have in this program is one function definition, the show message with these two print statements. Alright, so if I do not have a function call and I run it, nothing happens. Right? And again, that's to be expected because function definitions, all they do is they define what a function can do, but it doesn't actually run the code until you make a call to it, until you do a function call. So now I'll go ahead and run it again. And there you go. Now you can see, alright, there is a function definition. Once this call happened, it went to this function definition and said, okay, I'm going to print these two lines of code. So the way Python sort of reads this program, it still reads everything top down. So, you know, it reads this comment, and then it hits this function definition. So when Python is reading a function definition, all it does is it just sort of says, okay, if at any point you then make a function call to this function named showMessage, I will come back to this function definition and run this code here. So again, it doesn't actually run this code while it's reading through. It just sort of keeps in mind, alright, this is what this function's going to do. Then it keeps reading, and then finally it hits this function call. And it says, okay, show message, well, I know exactly what to do, because this is show message here. So I'm going to go ahead and run those two lines of code. So again, function definition doesn't actually run code. The function call is what runs the code. Alright, so generally when you have a program, you will have many function definitions in it. This last program that we just wrote just had the one function definition and then the one function call to it. But generally you will have multiple functions, right? And again, that's sort of the idea behind them, is it's a way to sort of break up your programs into smaller, more manageable chunks. So generally when you're working with code, sure, you'll have many function definitions, but there will be one function definition that's called main. So you'll have one main function, and this main function is sort of controlling the shots for your entire program. So the main function may call the other functions inside of it. It's sort of saying, okay, first do this, then do that, then do this. The main function is really sort of the brains of the operation. So generally in your programs, you'll have a main function definition that does, you know, most of the work, and then you'll have other function definitions that maybe do their own little pieces, and then at the very end you'll make a call to said main function. So generally you'll have one main function. This is called when the program starts, and then this main function is, again, it's sort of the director of your program. It's calling the shots, saying, hey, other function, you go now, other function, you go now. It's sort of controlling everything else. So again, I think best taught by example. So go ahead and pause this video and go ahead and make another new file in Python with this content. So you can edit the file that you already have if you want, if you don't want to have to, you know, retype this code again. But this is essentially taking our program that we had before that just did the show message and then the function call to show message, but it's setting it up in a way so that we now have a main function as well. So go ahead, pause this, type this up. As you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and edit the file that I have as well. And again, make sure you're paying very close attention to these indents. As you can see again, as I copy and pasted, the indents are now gone. So I'm going through and putting them back in again. Alright. So once you've gotten to this point where you have this program, before we run it, let's step through it and sort of figure out what's going on. Alright, so we have two different function definitions here. Here's one, and here's another one. And I know that this is the end of this one because the next line of code after this is over here on this level. So again, those indents, super important. The only reason why I know these 3 lines of code are part of this function main is because they are all indented the same amount. And then I know that these 2 lines of code are part of this function definition show message because they're both indented right under it. So again, stepping through this, I'm Python, I'm reading your code. Alright, comment, cool. Okay, cool, I hit a function definition. So if at any point you tell me to run main, you say, hey, function call to main, I will come back here and run these 3 lines of code. Awesome. Alright, then Python keeps reading, hits another function definition. Same sort of idea. If at any point you tell me show message, this is the code I'm going to run. Cool. Alright, so 2 function definitions, and then we hit a function call. So again, function calls, that's what actually runs the code. That is what is actually going to say, hey, go back and run that code that I told you about before. So this is a function call to main. So again, this is the main function that we're calling. So it's going to go back here and do these 3 lines of code. So it'll do this print. It then calls another function. So you can call other functions within your own functions. So we'll call this other function show message. So that'll show this message. And then it'll come back, do this line of code, and then that's it. And the reason why I know that's it is because this is where we were before, right? We did this function call to main, which did this. And there's no more code after this function call. Alright, so let's go ahead and run it, see what happens. Alright, so it did exactly what I just said. So it goes and calls main, prints this first message here, I have a message for you. Then it makes another function call to show message, which prints these 2 lines of code. After it shows message, it then prints goodbye, and then that's it. So I recommend maybe spending a couple minutes, definitely change this up so it's more specific to you. Maybe add a couple more lines to main, maybe call show message a couple times, so maybe you can do another call to show message. What is that going to do? So play around with it a little bit. My recommendation would be to edit the code a bit, try to guess what it's going to do, and then run it.